Okay, welcome to midweek space news on the 21st of January 2026. Before we get into the space news this week, you can follow us at Space Startup Hub on X, and I put my videos on there. I occasionally post and reply to stuff. So that's X. So let's get into the first article this week, and if I can find it, here it is. Okay, I put myself in the corner here. So this is VAST delays Haven-1 launch to 2027. And this is payloadspace.com. So VAST Space, which is building a commercial space station as a possible replacement for the International Space Station, they've delayed their launch of their commercial space station until next year, that is 2027. It was originally going to launch in the first half of this year. It goes on to say, will now launch no earlier than Q1, the first quarter of 2027, and could be significantly longer before the station gets its first crew. It can host a maximum of 4 commercial astronauts for missions lasting up to 2 weeks. SpaceX's Dragon capsule will bring astronauts to the station and provide the station's life support and power, and crewed flights won't start until the launcher, that is SpaceX, is confident in the station's safety. We have to basically convince SpaceX, both contractually and with many verification events, that it will be safe to dock Dragon. They will put a fully trained crew on board Dragon and bring them up. And later in the article it says, still has a chance to be the first commercial space station in low Earth orbit, and it's the smallest of its competitors' initial offerings. So the other contenders are, you have Starlab Space, Axiom Space, and potentially Blue Origin's Orbital Reef. So it finishes with Haven-2 is expected to include multiple modules and to offer a continuous crew presence in LEO. So that is the article. So there's another article from Ars Technica that has an interview with Max Hout, the CEO. But first, before we get into that article, let's have a look at some videos and some stills so we understand more about VAST Space. First of all, let's start with welcome to Haven-1. So you can see here, and I put myself in the corner, you can see Crew Dragon approaching the Haven-1 module and docking with it. So this is the entrance in. You've got sleeping bays on the side there, and storage areas. You've got a nice big window. You can look at Earth. Very important for mental health. The sleeping areas, the storage areas there, central area, common area, if you like, just floating around in space. And then you can mess with the thermal controls and so on. And you can do experiments, take stuff out the payload lockers, do medical stuff, and just gaze out the window. And there's a table that comes up from the floor. The sleeping space as well. So the sleeping space for 4 people, and that is Crew Dragon docked to Haven-1. So that gives you an idea. So this is very important, this bit here. This is where they make the money, hopefully. There's 10 payload lockers. I think these are called mid-deck payload lockers. Exactly the same as ISS, the same dimensions and so on. If you've done experiments on the ISS, you can just slot the exact same experiment into the Haven-1, it will work. So you get power, you get Ethernet connection, and you can do your microgravity experiments. There's 10 lockers. I think maybe 4 of them are allocated already. I don't know if you can't really see from here. Yuri has one of the lockers, Redwire has another, and I think there's 1 or 2 Japanese companies. We have this image of 4 people from VAST in a Crew Dragon. So no training has started yet. It's going to be at least another year probably. And they can do training in probably 6 months easy. So they haven't even selected the crew for the first mission. We also have this image. So they've flown in space. They've flown some of their core systems and subsystems just to validate they can work in a vacuum and in space. So you can see the VAST logo there. So with that, let's go on to the second story. So I put myself in the corner and let's read this article by Eric Berger in Ars Technica. So I'll bring it up. The first commercial space station, Haven-1, is now undergoing assembly for launch, and you can see it there. It's still under assembly, and there's a lot of verification and testing that's needed. So let's read what they say in the article. There are expected to be multiple bidders in Phase 2 of NASA's commercial space station program. So for Phase 1, we have Voyager Technologies, which is a Starlab Space consortium, including not just Voyager, but Airbus, Mitsubishi, and MDA Space. And then we have Axiom Space with the Axiom Station. We have Blue Origin with Orbital Reef and Vast Space with Haven-1. Select one or more likely two of these companies for larger contracts. That's the Phase 2 awards later this year. And this interview is based on an interview with Max Haut, who is the Chief Executive of Vast Space. And they're building the smaller interim space station Haven-1, which is more of a minimal viable product for a space station. It's the minimal amount of habitation volume that is viable and useful. So you can launch it on a Falcon 9, a medium launch vehicle, and you can send Crew Dragon for a couple of weeks, maybe up to a month, and do experiments and so on. It has payload lockers, a nice view of Earth. That should be in space. Well, it was going to be this year, but now it's been delayed. So the article says that the public launch date was mid-2026, but Haut explained in this interview that the launch date is no longer tenable. And this is the first I've heard that it's been pushed back. We're moving as safely and as fast as we can. So he thinks that when they launch in 2027, none of the competitors will be launching before 2028 or probably 2029. So we'll see. In terms of the hardware, they have on the books with NASA a full test campaign end of this year. That's 2026. And they intend to launch in the first quarter of 2027. In terms of what happens after the launch, there will be a period where we can monitor and control it uncrewed and confirm everything is functioning perfectly. So obviously you want to make sure there's no leaks, thermal control is good, life support is working. Check out all the systems first before you send a crew mission. We have to basically convince SpaceX, both contractually and with many verification events, that it will be safe to dock Dragon. We have a very strong incentive to send a crew as quickly as we can safely do so. Answering a question on whether they pick the crew yet, they're in negotiations, both with private individuals and nation states. In terms of the number of crew missions for Haven-1, they say a nominal plan is for a 2-week mission, one fully contracted with SpaceX, that's the first one, and a second one that we have a deposit and an option on, which is news to me, it's the first time I've heard that, and 2-week missions, option to maybe do a 30-day mission if we want. Plans after Haven-1, there will be a second station called Haven-2, 2 docking ports, more power, and potentially more volume. So in the renders I've seen, it was definitely a stretched vehicle. It was definitely had more volume. So maybe that's not the case anymore. He says we have a lot of optionality. So it seems to me Haven-2 is still not fully locked in the design, and they're still iterating through the possible options. And then the question is, NASA is nearing the second phase of its competition for commercial space stations known as CLDs. Haut says it's unclear yet what the requirements will be. If they ask for a 30-day mission, we have the option to offer it on Haven-1 in 2027 if we want to. And then Max Haut talks about we need to make sure we're ready to start a continuous crewed mission by the end of 2030. And then on hopes of what's in the RFP, that's a request for a proposal from NASA, a few key recommendations we feel strongly about. And he mentions a demonstration mission, and he wants NASA to move faster and to require a demonstration. They should require a demonstration with crew as quickly as possible before they buy services. And then he says, ensure we have not just one winner. With the current budget, we don't think more than 2 winners is reasonable. And he then goes on to say, assuming 2 winners, we are confident we can be successful and profitable with 2 companies operating, given NASA's current budget, which isn't that much at the moment. And he says, we need Europe, we need Japan, and he then talks about in-space, semiconductor, fiber, pharmaceutical manufacturing, and so on. So that is the article. So just close that there. My big concern, and it was at the end, where he says we need Europe and we need Japan. I'm not sure how successful they will be, because if you look at the competitors, you look at, say, Starlab Space or even Axiom Space, they have a lot of non-American companies. Axiom Space, the flight hardware is fabricated by Thales Alenia in Italy, so you have the European connection, and some Italians and Europeans, Polish, Hungarian crew have gone up already. So Europe and ESA and those space agencies are familiar with Axiom Space. In the case of Starlab Space, you have Airbus manufacturing the habitats, and you have Mitsubishi from Japan, you have MDA Space from Canada, so it's much more international. That's not the case with Vast Space, which is very US-centric. And considering the geopolitical events, especially between US and Europe, I don't think having something that's very US-centric will be helpful in sales outside of America. So that's my concern. I was very enthusiastic about vast space. That was because they would be in space first, 2026, and they would have a year or two or longer, get crew up there, get the experience of operating a space station and so on. But now it's been delayed a year or more. And when you've got much, much bigger space stations like Starlab Space, which will be 8 meters in diameter with 6 decks and can carry out 400 experiments, I think it will struggle against something like Starlab Space. It's a huge international consortium. Axiom Space already ferries crews to the International Space Station already. So I think it's slipping down the list. The big advantage it had was it was going to be first. We'll see, but I'm less confident now. In terms of their plans later on, this is a render. This is probably sometime in the 2030s. But these are Haven-2 modules, and then in the center you have this large hub, which will be lifted on Starship. That would spin round, giving a small amount of gravity. So this is the only space station that has any future plans for spin gravity. Obviously, the amount of gravity you would get would be very, very low. Otherwise, considering the size, the astronauts would be sick unless it was very, very low gravity. But still, it's an interesting concept. This is, before you spin it, you just aggregate Haven-2 modules, connect them all together, and you'd have a microgravity environment, which would be quite large. You'd have 8 windows, lots of solar panels, lots of power. And then you could split those up and put the large hub and spin everything up. And we actually do have a video, bring it up, put myself in the corner. This is their video for Haven-2. Although it looks like, as Max Hout said, there's lots of optionality, so it may not look like this. But you can see it's clearly stretched in comparison to Haven-1. It's got 2 windows, it's got 2 docking ports. It's not clear whether it will continue to look like this. It will definitely have 2 docking ports for sure, but it may not be any bigger. We'll have to see. You just keep docking these modules together and grow the station. You can have 1, 2, 3, 4 of them all docked together, as you can see here. So 4 of them, so there's a lot of volume at this point. And then this is the Starship hub, a very large hub. And then the Haven-2 modules split apart and then connect in a different configuration. And you see them disconnecting now and will join the main hub. And as they connect together, the hub will spin, and then the Haven-2 modules will have spin gravity, although very, very little gravity. So yeah, you can keep just docking modules and growing this space station. And Starship can dock to the central hub. And then you've got a cupola, so great views. So it looks very good. You've got a robotic arm. So it looks very, very impressive. So yeah, in the 2030s, you could have a massive space station that's actually spinning around. So yeah, it looks great. So that is a render of Haven-2. So this is what it looks like with just the Haven-2 modules docked together and then with a central hub. But you know, that's way in the future. I hope they're not delayed any more than 2027. That's the first story. Very interesting. Okay, on to our second story this week, and this just popped up, and it's Canada Rocket Company emerges from stealth. So I know nothing about this company, so let's read the article. So this is on Payload Space again. Canada Rocket Company, CRC, a Toronto-based launch startup, announced a 6.2 million Canadian dollar seed funding round, and it's funded by an all-Canadian team of investors. And this is in response to Canada's rapidly increasing investment in the space domain. It's led by concerns about US tariffs that have led Canada to make a record contribution to ESA, which is the European Space Agency, which it's part of. And the country announced its Launch the North Challenge, committing 105 million Canadian dollars in public funds to help stand up sovereign launch capabilities. The article says the window of opportunity is small. The companies must reach low Earth orbit by 2028. And it says here about building a scalable architecture around a familiar methylox engine. So that's liquid oxygen and liquid methane, or natural gas. Field much of the tech with high TRL, that's technology readiness level, so that's near to being commercially available, and subsystems from the Canadian and European ecosystem. Again, this is, I guess, to get around US tariffs, and also to develop and test its E1 engine by the first half of next year, which will be 2020, and add a turbo pump set up for extra power by early 2028. So the R1 rocket can launch 700 kilos to low Earth orbit or 400 kilos to sun synchronous orbit. And it will satisfy the government's need for a mobile and responsive vehicle that can be launched in under 96 hours. So their R2 vehicle will be a medium lift vehicle, and it will have 7 E1 engines on the first stage, and apparently will be reusable. Okay, it's a reusable vehicle capable of bringing 6.5 tons to low Earth orbit. The founders have a lot of experience. One of the guys has nearly 10 years as a propulsion engineer at SpaceX, and the other guy has spent 6 years at SpaceX in head of avionics. So that's interesting add. The only company I'm familiar with in Canada is Nordspace that I've done a video on. Okay, our final story this week is on Isar Aerospace. We mentioned a few times already, but they are now very close to launching their second rocket. Their first rocket failed after about 30 seconds, but they're now ready again to attempt a second launch. So this is posted on X. Second launch coming up. We are targeting net, that's no earlier than 21st of January for mission onward and upward. Subject to weather, safety and range clearance, the launch window for our qualification flight opens at 9 p.m. Central European Time at our dedicated launch complex at Andoya Space. We do have a few more images. We have this one of the payload. So it will be sending a payload into space, and I can definitely see, like, it looks like they have an EXO launch payload and probably various others as well. So we also have, bring this up, we can see there is a official live stream, and this live stream is in partnership with, I think, NSF, NASA Space Flight. So you can find that on YouTube, and if I remember, I'll post it in the video description. So by the time this video is actually published, it's probably launched or not, or being delayed. So it's a live stream, so you can get notification of when it launches, and that'll be fun to watch. And we do actually have bring it up, we have a video of their testing of their second vehicle. So this is in Norway at the Andoya spaceport, and there's the launch pad, nice shots. And this is testing the first stage engines. This is the Spectrum launch vehicle. So the test goes great. They've got a launch license, and they will be launching, but Isar Aerospace are very well funded, probably one of the best funded space startups in Europe. That's it. The only other one I think who's in the same range is probably the Exploration Company, which builds cargo vehicles, so not really a competitor. There are other companies like PLD Space and Rocket Factory Augsburg, and Orbex and Skyrover and so on, and High Impulse and Maya Space. But I think Isar Aerospace is well in front. They've already attempted a launch, and now they're ready to attempt the second launch with payloads. So it's very exciting. We'll see what happens. So that is everything this week. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe if you haven't. I do these midweek space news roll-ups every week at the same time, and I do 2 dedicated videos as well, plus a live stream at the weekend. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.